Welcome back to the mental health sphere, where psychology meets real life. I am your host, and today we are discussing how to process traumatic memories. This is part 2 of our Cognitive Processing Therapy series. If you missed part 1, make sure to check that out, because in part 1, we go over the basics of CPT or Cognitive Processing Therapy. It's how it works and who it's good for. In part 2 today, we are getting into how to actually do it. If you're new here, welcome. We provide mental health advice based on our lived experience, research, and what has worked for others. Remember, while we aim to be accurate and helpful, this information is for general knowledge only and should not take the place of advice from your own healthcare provider. With that said, let's get into it. Okay, so before we get into the actual processing, there are some things that you need to have in order for this to work. First, you need to have identified your traumatic memory. You've gone through your traumatic event and you've selected one memory that you would like to process. Second, you want to identify the negative thoughts that come up when you think about that memory. For example, thoughts like "I'm a failure, could have done more, it's my fault," or whatever else comes up for you. Third, you want to identify the feelings that come up when you think about that memory. So maybe it's shame, fear, anxiety, sadness, anger, whatever it may be. Fourth, you want to notice your body's response to those thoughts and feelings. So maybe it's sweating, increased heart rate, difficulty breathing, feeling weak, or any other physical reaction that happens when you try to remember that memory and feel those emotions. And finally, you want to identify any safety behaviors that you engage in to stop those thoughts, feelings, and sensations. These could be things like staying busy, eating, drinking, isolating, seeking reassurance, avoiding reminders of the trauma, and so on. Once you have all of those components identified, then you can start the processing. The first step of processing is to vividly recall the memory. You want to find a safe, quiet place where you won't be interrupted and allow yourself to really fully experience the memory. Bring all of your senses online. What did you see? What did you hear? What did it smell like? What did it feel like? What did you taste? Really bring in all of those different aspects of that memory to the surface. There are a few ways that you can enhance the experience and really bring it to the forefront. One way is by using something called the WDP, or the where, when, who, what, and why. Another way is to use something called the SMRT, or the sensations, memories, reactions, and thoughts model. Both of these models help you to remember every aspect of that memory, so that you can truly get the whole picture. Okay, so once you've recalled the memory and brought all of those different aspects to the forefront, then you want to challenge your negative thoughts about the memory. So you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. The first question is, what evidence do I have that this thought is true? For example, if you're thinking "I'm such a failure," well, what evidence do you have that you're a failure? Maybe you didn't do as well on a test as you wanted, or maybe you got fired from a job, or maybe you made a mistake at work. Whatever the case is, you want to write down all the evidence that you can think of that supports that thought. Next, you're going to ask yourself, what evidence do I have that this thought isn't true? For example, if you were thinking "it's my fault," well, what evidence do you have that it's not your fault? Maybe you were given all of the tools that you needed to succeed, or maybe you were actually doing the best that you could at the time, just circumstances didn't align. Whatever the case is, you want to write down all of the evidence that you can think of that goes against that thought. And the third question that you're going to ask yourself is, what would it be like if I believe that this thought isn't true? For example, if you were thinking "I'm a failure," well, what would it be like if you didn't believe that? How would that change the way that you see yourself? How would that change the way that you interact with other people? How would it change the way that you move through the world? Really allowing yourself to explore that, okay? So once you've challenged those thoughts, and you've written down all of the evidence that you can think of, then you're going to move on to the next step, which is exploring alternative thoughts. You want to come up with a list of 10 alternative thoughts that are more adaptive and helpful. For example, if you were thinking "I'm a failure," a helpful alternative thought might be "everyone makes mistakes." "I'm human. I did the best that I could at the time," or whatever else comes up for you. So you want to brainstorm 10 different thoughts that are more helpful and adaptive? Once you've come up with that list, then you're going to circle the one that resonates with you the most, or the one that feels the most true to you. Then you're going to ask yourself why you resist believing that circled thought. Again, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. First question is, what makes me resist believing this thought? The second question is, what would it be like if I believed this thought? And the third question is, how would my life be different if I believed this thought? So now you've processed that memory, and you've created some space between yourself and that traumatic memory. Now you want to apply that newfound freedom and that newfound insight to your life. You want to notice any situations where you might engage in those old patterns, where you might have those unhelpful thoughts and beliefs come up. Notice those situations and then intentionally choose to use those alternative thoughts that you came up with during the processing step. So let's say that you in a situation where you feel like you restarting to get overwhelmed and you're restarting to feel those old feelings come up. In that moment, you stop, and you remind yourself of those alternative thoughts that you came up with. Pick the one that feels the most true to you in that moment, and you repeat that thought to yourself over and over until those old feelings start to subside. As you practice this, it will get easier and easier, and those alternative thoughts will become more and more automatic. Okay, and that's it. That's how you process traumatic memories using CPT, or cognitive processing therapy. I know that this can be really hard to do on your own. It's really helpful to have someone guide you through the process, especially if you're doing it on your own. But remember that you don't have to do this alone. You can always reach out to a therapist for support. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and a comment down below. We'd love to hear what you think. Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any of our videos. And remember, you can find all of the resources mentioned in this video in the description box below. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.